enclosing more than 18 acres and 194 million cubic feet of air. The Tropical Islands Resort is currently the largest uninterrupted volume in the world, the largest indoor water park in the world, and the container of the world's largest indoor rainforest. Located in the sparse municipality of Kraus-Nick-Grosswasserburg, 30 miles south of Berlin, Germany, the resort was built inside a former blimp hangar in 2004 and has been in successful operation since opening day. In an era marked by serious debate concerning climate change, material scarcity and the conflicts of globalization, the Tropical Islands Resort reveals a crucial link between the architectural interior and the public response to some of the greatest challenges facing contemporary society. As it reflects popular attitudes towards the climate, nature and culture, the Tropical Islands Resort begs the question: how has the architectural interior become a tool for aesthetic mediation in the 21st century, and what are its precedents? Nature, that concept which has signified the timeless and scaleless beyond human comprehension, has recently been given timely and spatial limitations in the clumsy hands of society. The human fascination with the non-human inspired the greenhouse building type, a site of both botanical veneration and violation, equally and inseparably. The first greenhouse was a mobile car designed for the year-round growth of a cucumber-like vegetable. Moved out into the sun and withdrawn under the cover of frames on wintry days, the first greenhouse was as much about the conservation of nature as its consumption. Advancements in ironwork and glass production transformed the greenhouse into an interiorized environment, against the visibly polluted urban atmosphere surrounding it. For the first time in history, specimens from around the world could be kept under a single roof, inspiring the global plunder of plant life in the pursuits of closed-system scholarship and public spectatorship. The language of conservation became commonplace as the scales of consumption reached new heights in the 20th century. The preservation of the global life systems within greenhouses was marketed as their greatest chance of survival in the modern world. Meanwhile, the office interior was imagined as a corporate greenhouse, in an effort to bring nature closer, to give the person who spends most of their time in an office a more habitable environment. In the urban atrium, botanical life was valued for nothing more than as an instrument for worker productivity. The reconstruction of the earth itself within the greenhouse building type had been considered as a viable solution to irreversible environmental degradation, the aesthetics of conservation financed by speculative consumption. In the greenhouse building type, the concept of nature has always most apparently been the subject of immense appreciation and the highly resilient plaything of technical intervention. The Tropical Islands Resort is, like nearly every greenhouse preceding it, a celebration of the human triumph over the material world, the insatiable quest for botanical and zoological comprehension, and the tension between human history and natural history that continues to be deeply unresolved and in many cases purposefully overlooked. The Tropical Islands Resort is a botanical spectacle. The resort's unofficial slogan, "Endless Summer," is featured on many of the souvenirs available at the gift shops. While the humidity of the air is the visitor's first clue that the interiorization of an endless summer is the motive of the Tropical Islands Resort, it is the evergreen palm trees that signify an impossibly sublime setting, far from the capricious climate of Western Europe, in the verdant cradle of all the tropical regions scattered across the globe. However, the sites it represents no longer bear the stability nor the composure that had always been assumed of them. The Tropical Islands Resort is a shrine to the places deforested to complete its image, a mirage of the places most affected by climate change to support those that turn away from them. The two atmospheres are at apparent odds with one another. The life systems subject to the meteorological atmosphere, the envelope that unites the world as a global exterior, are compromised for the betterment of the aesthetic atmosphere of the architectural interior. The current state of the two atmospheres makes visible a present danger. If the exterior environment can no longer maintain nature's fragility, and must be brought indoors, there will no longer be an outside to emulate. Though artifacts can only reveal a fraction of a culture's essence, the Western display of global power can be understood as the increasingly misguided attempt to disprove this claim. The earliest known attempt to express the world through the accumulation of its artifacts is the Cabinet of Curiosities, a collection of worldly objects joined together within a single piece of furniture. As the world was said to have become smaller in the 19th century, the colonially expanding West developed the World's Fair exhibition type as a habitable version of the Cabinet of Curiosities, allowing the world's many disparate regions to more easily reveal their cultures and potential prospects to one another under a single roof. The first World's Fair was held inside an enormous glass building that successfully interiorized the sublimity of gazing over the expanse of an unobstructed horizon. Less an overview of the rich history of world cultures than a vast spatial catalog for investors and business magnates, it focused almost exclusively on the future of these regions rather than their pasts. The increased popularity of ethnography in subsequent World's Fairs inspired the display of both the technological futures and archaeological pasts of world cultures. The interiors were the sites of Western futures, of contemporary architecture and machinery protected by modern engineering, while exterior spaces were reserved for the exhibition of non-Western cultures, performing antiquated customs in the form of an outdoor circus. The future was inside, the past was outdoors, and time and space were both rendered as commodities. As it competed with both the allure of international travel and increasingly immersive media, the World's Fair transitioned into the theme park. World peace was envisioned as an antiquated parody of the seven continents, a false narrative of global relations, an imaginary past serving as a template for an imaginary future, and an embedding of novel technology within globally familiar imagery, unified by air conditioning. The Tropical Islands Resort incorporates these three models of the world. The global system of exchange, the demonstrable exertion of power over people and things, and the unapologetic revision of global relations. Through an imaginary meeting of the world's tropical cultures, thousands of years before the Industrial Revolution and sometime after the first human settlement. The Tropical Islands Resort is a culture condenser. Turned towards the past with wings outstretched towards the future, it reproduces the places that have long inspired schools of painting and transcontinental voyages, with a desire to obliterate history and turn it into collective mythology, to dwell within the cabinet of curiosities and the histories that never happened. The Tropical Islands Resort adds a new layer of complexity to the interiorization of nostalgia by not only reproducing a fictional space and time, but also a climate, as the cyclically predictable and stable weather patterns in the tropics are becoming figments of the past. While the buildings of tropical regions are undoubtedly distinct from those of more frigid climates, without the snow to whisk away and the below-freezing temperatures to combat, the buildings within the Tropical Islands Resort are competing only with the occasional spike in temperature caused by momentary air conditioning malfunctions. The Tropical Islands Resort revels in the spectacle of its own containment. In the contrast of weathered building materials against the protective metal structure overhead. In the encasement of historical imagery like mosquitoes in amber. And in the gathering of disparate regions under a single roof to be given a single identity. Tropical Islands. The choice to name the single building as a plural ecology is a reminder of the grandeur of its own achievement. To condense an idealized world, at a scale so immense, and with a climatic system so advanced, that it can be compared to every corner of the earth to which it refers combined. The contamination of life systems and the conflicts of global relations guided the fears of the modern era. The gas mask was a symbol and a tool for this moment in time, with the bottom half equipped with an air filter for immunization, and the top half made transparent for communication with the outside world. In the 20th century, the two futures of the architectural interior were proposed on opposing sides of this binary. Those concerned about the selective weaponization of the air, as it was initially practiced in the First World War, developed architectures of pure immunization and response. Bunkers submerged the typical single-story suburban home to distract the nuclear family from the threats of the howling earth 10 feet above their heads. Meanwhile, a handful of architects imagine new social ecologies high above the Earth's surface, sustained within vast interiors to minimize their reliance on the resources exploited in previous lifetimes. Their commitment to an irreducible public made bubbles as productively utopian as they were daringly ahistorical. The distinction between the two interior types is one of spatial politics. Between pastiche opacity and utopian transparency, between short-term and long-term solutions, and between paranoiac individualism and ambitious communitarianism. The Tropical Islands Resort is a manifestation of the two main responses to the environmental crisis. The Tropical Islands Resort is a bunker bubble. Looking below the horizon line, the Tropical Islands Resort gives into nearly every technique of pastiche and escapism imaginable. Looking above, it can be mistaken for one of the cloud structures imagined only in the wildest of utopian dreams. Though the membrane is in stark contrast to nearly everything below it, the resort's operators have since made no attempt to conceal it. No blue paint to resemble the sky that surrounds it. No pixel or projection screen to operationalize its resort-wide visibility. The structural membrane, as the last remaining element of its former role as a bloom hanger, is decidedly left intact. Intact, that is, except for the 44 transparent panels installed to allow a generous amount of sunlight into the resort over the course of the day in the 4 seasons. Though it is an immunological bubble of the highest technical ability, it still maintains a relationship to the world around it. If the sky over the resort lost its color, so too would the world inside it. Its occupants might huddle close together to form a community of the interior, enlightened by the tyrannies of humanity's past. The Tropical Islands Resort did not appear out of thin air, nor is it alone in its operations. The main elements on display within its interior have each been the subjects of control for thousands of years, and key devices have evolved to become the instruments of that control. First by pulling botanical elements out of their seasonal rhythms. Then by fabricating a miniature theater of the world. And finally by connecting through division. As these objects became the muses for architectural production, their interiority became the tools for aesthetic mediation. To bring the temperate to the intemperate. To consolidate the global system of exchange. To protect the future and mock the past. To venerate and violate raw materials. To deodorize the scrap heap of history. To embody the estranged. To dramatize the incubation of life systems in preparation of their abandonment. And, finally, to respond to our mistakes, by either taking shelter from them or revising the social contract. As the consequences of climate change, material scarcity and the conflicts of globalization establish aesthetics entirely their own, we appear to be inching closer to our baser instincts. Through a commitment to 3 essential components of interiority, we instruct the architectural interior to dig deeper into its primary function as shelter. First, under the auspices of the architectural interior, the manipulation of world elements is staged. The great mysteries that lie within the compositions of the elements at the center of human inquiry have been popularly overshadowed by their sensate properties, those qualities which can be most easily apprehended by the naked eye and the wandering mind. Staging is the method by which commodities stand in for deep-seated, collectively felt phenomena, and architecture is the stage itself. Second, the staging of world elements is expertly supported by invisible maintenance, embedded within the walls of the perimeter and underfoot. This Baroque ensemble of domestic gadgetry epitomizes the intestinal complexity of gracious living, hidden away by misdirection and a stealthy cleanup crew. The concealing of maintenance systems is itself an aesthetic practice, as crucial as that which takes center stage. Third, the staging of world elements and their invisible maintenance are both supported by the dome that cradles them. The enveloping structure is an incubator of common fantasies, a distinction between the familiar and the as of yet nameless, and an agent of mediation that makes some things appear and others vanish. The realities of life systems and cultural relations are aesthetically mediated by these 3 elements in the architectural interior as effectively as other more renowned forms of media. While literature, Illustration and cinema famously reveal the essences of world elements as often as they conceal them. The architectural interior has proven itself to stand tall among their ranks. However, the architectural interior has not yet absolutely reached the limits of baser instincts. Although the aesthetics of immunity, consumption and nostalgia seem to be on display at the tropical islands resort without competition, they hang in a balance with their opposing forces. World elements are called into question when their manipulation is as apparent as it is here, in the architectural interior, where they are spectacular precisely because we get the sense this is not where they belong. Let us look to the tropical islands resort as a barometer for the unpredictable future. Will it defend the life systems it has long forsaken, or continue to devour what little there remains? Will it recall more complete histories of the cultures it has parodied, or continue to exploit them until they are reduced to false memories? Will it become the site of a brave new republic, or the gated community of the few and faint-hearted? As we direct our attention to the architectural interior, we will undoubtedly see ourselves in its reflection.